Okay, let's get started. So, if you are visiting with us and don't know me, my name is Charles Plemons. This is a study of Esther. We have workbook packets if anybody needs them, or I've got the individual handouts if you just need it for tonight. If anybody needs either of those things. Okay. For those who weren't here last week, you missed out on a good time. We had candy buckets, and we did kind of a trivia review and just kind of went over everything that we've been talking about. And we didn't want to pull ahead, excuse me, of everybody else in the class who was out for fall break. So this week we are going to be able to start now in chapter 4 of Esther. So if you weren't able to join us last week, you really haven't missed out. We're going to pick right back up where we left off. So in our books, we are in section 5 now. And I know we did a review with those who were here, but if you were on fall break, it's probably been a while since you've looked at this. So let's just real quick rehash what had happened in chapter 3 before we read chapter 4. So in chapter 3 of the book of Esther, we are introduced to Haman. And Haman is promoted to this very high position of authority within the kingdom. And there goes out this order that everybody should bow before Haman and pay respects to Haman. And Mordecai refuses to do so. So he does not bow, and word gets back to Haman. He finds out about this, and he is enraged by this treatment from this Jewish man. And so he hatches a plan not only to get revenge upon Mordecai, but who does he decide he's going to take it out on? All the Jews. Yeah, he's going to take this out on everybody. And he is going to wipe them out. And so he goes to the king with this plan. And he tells the king what about the Jews? What's he say they do or don't do? Yeah, they follow a different law. They don't obey the king. And so you can look to Mordecai and see that he was not bowing before Haman. But he's made this sweeping generalization about the Jews. And so the king thinks, well, I don't need a rebellion. I don't need this kind of problem. And Haman's like, well, I've got a plan. Let's kill them off. And, you write it into law that on such and such day, we're going to execute all of the Jews. And he knows that that's going to cost money. So what does he offer the king? He offers to pay for it. Yeah. He offers a bribe along with this. Yeah, let me take care of this for you. Let me take care of these rebellious people. And so the king thinks, well, this sounds great. Let's do it. So he sends out this decree. He puts it in all the languages that are spoken across the kingdom. And it announces on such and such day, the Jews will be executed. And so we see in the city that there is much confusion. People don't really understand what is going on because as far as everybody across the whole nation were concerned, the Jews hadn't done anything. Just out of nowhere, you have this decree that they're going to be executed. So the people really don't understand what's going on. But Haman and the king really aren't worried about it. How do they handle spending time after this decree goes out? What do they go do? They drink. That's right, which seems to be a favorite of the king. Over and over, we've already seen this kind of behavior. So they decide they're going to execute all of these people, and then they go decide to drink. All right, so that gets us caught up now to chapter 4. So let's pick up right there. So would somebody like to read for us? How about verses 1 through, let's see, how many are in there? 1 through 8?
When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. And he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them laid sackcloth and ashes. When Esther, young women, and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off the sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Haddock, one of the king's eunuchs, who had appointed to her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Haddock went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in the front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for the destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain to her and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people.
Okay, thank you. All right, would somebody like to pick up there in verse 9 and go ahead through the end of verse 17?
So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called, he has but one law, put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go in to the king these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded.
All right, thank you. Okay, so this decree has gone out. Mordecai has learned what has happened. And it's interesting, he knows some of the backstory. You know, we were talking about how there would have been this great confusion that was among the people. They don't really know why this decree has gone out. But we see that Mordecai is a little bit more in the know. And that makes sense because he's an official right here in the palace. And so he has some of the details about what Haman has done. And we see that right here in the beginning in verse 1 of chapter 4. It says Mordecai learned all that had been done. So he knows the details, and he knows that Haman had gone to the king. And we also see that he is aware of the promise of the money. So Mordecai is aware of what's happened. And so how does he react to this? He tears his clothes. What else? He mourns. Yeah, what does he put on? Sackcloth and ashes. Yeah. What's the significance of sackcloth and ashes? Have we ever seen that in Scripture before? There are other places you can think of. Mourning, weeping, yeah, that's often that lament. We see that. Job put on sackcloth. So what in the world is sackcloth? Anybody have an idea?
In the burlap.
Burlap, yeah. Nice, soft, right? No, not at all. Not at all. So why in the world, if you are already in mourning, why in the world would you put on one of the most uncomfortable types of cloth that you could find? It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's not a comfort clothing. It's a type of penance or begging from God. You know, this idea of, oh, I'm so distraught, and I'm going to put on this clothing that is uncomfortable every moment, kind of as a sacrifice, as a way to appeal to God for mercy. It wasn't a comfort cloth. It was clothed for this idea of begging for mercy, putting on this idea of mourning and repentance and covering himself in ash. So Mordecai has ripped off his clothes, he's put on sackcloth, and he's put on ashes. And he doesn't go into the palace. How far does he go? To the gate. Why didn't he go in? You can't go into the palace wearing sackcloth. There's a dress code. There's a dress code, apparently. So you can't go in wearing sackcloth. And so he still, even though he's in mourning, even though they are about to be put to death, he still doesn't go so far as to break the law, does he? He goes to the gate. So he's here, he is in mourning. And how are the rest of the Jews reacting? Same way, yeah, there's this public lament. So the Jews now, the news has gone out, and there is this weeping, there's this wailing. And so many, it says, lay on sackcloth and ashes. So the people are basically distraught. And of course they are. Of course they are. They've just received this news that all of them are going to be put to death. Now, apparently, Esther didn't know all of the details. It said Mordecai knew all, but Esther, she finds out that Mordecai is out here laying at the gate, and he's in sackcloth. And so what does she do? She sends him clothes. That's right. So she hears from her servants that Mordecai's in distress, and so she sends clothes. So we don't really know exactly what she's thinking. You know, she's like, well, let's send him some clothes. Here's some comfort. It's not like he just suddenly lost his wardrobe, but she tries to comfort him, but she doesn't know the details of what has happened. But Mordecai sends back to the servants word about what is happening. So she has now been told about this decree or this edict. All right. In verse 7, this just kind of reiterates that Mordecai knew all that was going on. It says, and Mordecai told all that had happened to him and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. So let's keep in mind, even throughout this, even though that Mordecai is one of the Jews that has now been put under the pending execution, he still obviously has connections. He has influence because he's able to get enough details about what's going on that he even knows all the way to the point of what Haman has done. So we have to keep in mind that Mordecai is not just some random individual. This is an important person here in the operation of the kingdom. And we already saw that he exhibits loyalty. What had he done for the king? Yeah, saved his life, told about the plot. How do you think he's feeling about that now? Betrayed, yeah. Mourning. Yeah, so here you've got the situation where recently he saved the king's life, and now the king has gone and declared that the Jews should be executed. So, and he knows exactly why. So you've got to think that he's second guessing that act of loyalty. All right, so Esther has now heard of this pending destruction. What does Mordecai ask her to do? Go talk to the king. Well, that's reasonable, right? Who is she? She's the queen. Doesn't it sound plausible that the queen would have some opportunity to talk with the king? Makes sense. So he tells her, you need to go to the king, implore the king, beg the king's favor. You need to convince him to save your people. So the eunuch comes back to Esther. He delivers these words. And here we're now by verse 10, verse 11. Esther is reluctant to speak to the king. How come?
Against the law.
It's against the law. It's a no-no. She hasn't been called. So she needs to go in. She replies here, nobody, no man, no woman can go to the king in his court without being called, without being risked of put to death. Well, we've got to stop and think, well, wait a minute. This is the queen. This is the king's wife. Why does she need to go to the court and talk to him? Why couldn't she just talk to him anytime? That's just the way things done. That's the law, maybe. Could be. What else might be going on? What was that?
He was a jerk.
He was a jerk? Okay, well, I think we've established that, sure. Yeah. I don't have any candy. I like that answer. Maybe I have some stickers. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So, yeah, he was a jerk. Okay, maybe. All right. Why else might she not be able to talk to the king?
But wouldn't it be the case because she was a woman and women didn't have rights like that, but also the queen essentially, like, for lack of better word, she was just a pretty face for the king.
Yeah, so two good points right there. One, didn't have the rights that you would think that maybe she had. Now, we are told that men or women who went in would be under the same penalty, but I think you're onto something for sure with this idea of she wouldn't have the same rights. And also, she was just a pretty face. Okay, well, we also have a clue here at the end of verse 11. How long has it been since she's seen the king? 30 days. All right, so imagine you're married and you haven't seen your wife in 30 days and you live in the same abode. Okay, that seems kind of strange, right? Until we stop and think, how did she end up becoming queen? Beauty contest, right? They populated what? A harem of women. Did they send them home? No. No. This is not the same kind of marriage or relationship that we think of today. They weren't just sharing the same bed chamber. This was not this wonderful, glamorous kind of marriage. And sometimes we kind of maybe get that idea or this impression, oh, she went from rags to riches, she's now the queen. There's still this harem of women. And so for at least the last 30 days, she hasn't even seen the king. She doesn't know when she's going to get to see the king. She is treated, even though she is the queen, very much like property. She doesn't have the ability to just say, oh, hey, honey, by the way, that decree that you put out, let's talk about it. That's not an option. This is urgent. So the only opportunity that she has to go and speak to the king is to go in like any other court visitor would do, and she's not on the docket. She's going to have to interrupt things. And the king is fully within his rights when that happens to execute whoever interrupts the proceedings. That shines a little bit different light on this whole situation. This is truly a dangerous situation for her to come into. So she relates this to Mordecai. She through the servants again. So Mordecai is not directly talking to Esther. There's a separation here. So he doesn't have full run of the palace. She doesn't have full run of the palace. Also, the last we saw, he was stuck in sackcloth by choice, but that left him where? Outside, at the gate. That's right. So they're not just chatting back and forth. They didn't have phones to text each other and plan these things out. They're having to communicate through the servants. So she tells the servants, it's been 30 days since I've even seen the king. If I go in to see him, I could be executed. And so the servant takes this message back to Mordecai. So she's not really sure what to do. So really, she's trying to seek some advice or some clarity. Saying, look, if I do this, there's a good chance the king will just have me killed. Is that a reasonable fear from her? Why? They kicked out the last one. As far as we know, they didn't kill her. But what else do we know about this individual? He's volatile. That's right. He's not all there. He's a dangerous individual. This is the guy that, as far as we know, we think if historians have matched this king with Xerxes, this is the one that tried to brand the sea, had it whipped. We've already seen when he got mad at his wife, he just kicked her out. We see that when his favored servant comes to him and offers him a bride, he's willing to wipe out an entire race of people. So is it reasonable for the queen to think he may kill me? Yes, absolutely. Depending on his mood, depending on the day that he's having, he may just be bored with her. Would she think that she could be replaced? Sure. There's already an entire harem of women. She hasn't seen him in 30 days. So this is an extremely dangerous situation. So we can understand that she's a little bit reluctant to go see the king. All right, so Mordecai has a reply. Again, he doesn't reply directly to Esther. Imagine these servants just running back and forth between them. So now the servants are running back to Esther. And what message does he have? And this is by verse 13. Warned her. Yes. What did he warn her?
Not safe simply because you're the queen.
Right. That's right. You're not safe simply because you're the queen. Well, you would think that warning would also resonate deeply within her also, because what did she just tell Mordecai? Didn't they just give each other the same message? She just said, I'm not safe because I'm the queen. I can't just walk in. Well, he's telling her the same thing. Just because you're the queen, it's not going to protect you from this decree. It's kind of ironic that they told each other in different words the exact same thing. So he's warned her. You're not going to be safe in the palace. You can't escape there more than anybody else. But then he appeals to her from a more spiritual sense. Now again, we don't see God directly mentioned, but he appeals to her providence and her role. So in verse 14, what does he try to convince her of? Or pose to her?
It's going to happen one way or the other.
It's going to happen one way or the other, right? Right. What will happen one way or another? Yeah. Whether you go and beg or not, God is going to deliver his people. Now, how could Mordecai make that claim? What did Mordecai obviously know? Had God just spoken to him and said, hey, it's going to be all right, I'm going to get y'all out of it?
We're the chosen people. That's the promise given to you.
Exactly. Mordecai is relying on what he knows of God. He's talking about the heritage that he's been brought up in, the religion that he's brought up in, and knowing the promises of God. This is the chosen people. God has not yet fulfilled all that he intended to fulfill through his people. So Mordecai is choosing to admit God is going to deliver his people. I just don't know how it's going to happen. Now,
It's very reminiscent of Luke 19 when triumphal entry and Jesus says, my servants are quiet and stones will cry out. Like, it's going to happen one way or the other.
yeah, but isn't it interesting? Mordecai obviously has the faith that God is going to deliver his people somehow, and yet he's in sackcloth and ashes, weeping at the gate. How do those go hand in hand?
I mean, I think it could also be looked at as like a pleading to God as well. I think you can show your emotions to plead and mourn and plead. I mean, I think it's a human emotion. I think we see Jesus plead to the Father, asking him to take the cup away from him, but knowing still that, hey, God's will be done regardless. So I think you can have both of those two and they still coexist.
I think so. Yeah, and we also don't know, we know God's promises, but we don't know how God is going to fulfill all of those promises. You know, so Mordecai might know well that God is going to deliver his people, but does that mean that he's going to deliver all of them? He just needs some of them to survive to be able to fulfill all of his plans, right? So Mordecai could still be distraught over what is going to happen to us. Even if they don't all get wiped out, how much death, destruction, suffering could be coming upon the people. So he knows God is going to deliver some way, somehow. Well, that's a good example for us. We know God's promises, but does that prevent you from ever being sad or distraught or begging God or not understanding exactly how things are going to work out? Even though you know deep down things are going to work out for the best. We're promised that things are going to work out for the best for Christians. Have you ever been down on your knees crying and in pain? Even though you know? Well, that's what's going on with Mordecai. He still has his faith. He knows that there's going to be deliverance for the Jews, but that doesn't change the immediate threat of suffering for his people, for him. He doesn't know exactly how it's going to play out. So he's mourning and he's begging God for deliverance from this, but he doesn't know how it's going to come. So he warns Esther that it's going to come somehow. If you stay silent, relief will come somehow. It will still happen if you stay silent. But then, the last part of verse 14, he asks a wonderful question. What's he ask her? Who knows? I'm asking you. Who knows?
Who knows what year, where you are, secret to the secret.
Right. I think all of us need to be asking ourselves that on a constant basis. How often do you, in hindsight, realize God put you exactly where he wanted you to be? A lot of times we don't recognize it in the moment. But sometimes we look back and it's like, wow, all these events led up to where I could say this one thing to this person that encouraged them. Or I was in just the right place to help this person out or to do this thing. Or I was in the right spot that this person was able to encourage me. Or I did this and heard this lesson or whatever. All of it is God's providence working in our lives. He's posed this question to her, who knows whether you've been made queen for such a time as this? He's posing to her, maybe God's plan the whole time was to put you in the palace so that you would be there to go to the king. Now, that still required Esther to do what? Yeah. Risk her life. That's right. So, even though God knew how things were going to work out, and God may have directly put her there, that didn't change the fear for Esther. That didn't change the duty that she had, the courage that it took to do it, because God knowing, he didn't tell Esther, hey Esther, it's all going to be all right. You can go to the king, he's going to accept this. No. She had to go out and do it by what? Faith. She had to do it by faith. She had to take that risk. Bless you.
I think, and back to Mordecai's statement, like, yeah, you're gonna die, like, you could die just because you're a Jew as well. It's more of a, what do you got to lose if you do anything anyways? Like, if you do something and you die, same result as if you do nothing and you're gonna die the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be seen as an encouragement in that kind of way too.
Absolutely.
You're in a, not in a, I don't know how to, you know.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, so, this is going to happen, so if it does happen, you're going to be executed also. So what's the difference if you get executed in advance? Yeah, that's a good point.
What do you got to lose?
What do you have to lose? That's, yeah, really. Yeah, but turn that around, what do you have to gain?
Exactly, yeah.
You could be there and save your entire nation.
I hadn't thought about it before, but I can see her saying, it's gonna happen anyway, good, let's go to plan B. That's it.
Right. Yeah, she didn't have to do this, but she chose to. But it's a dangerous situation. Can you imagine the pressure? So you've now learned that all of your people are going to be executed. You know that the Persian law, once it is written, it can't be undone. And your only hope is to go and talk to a volatile king and hope that somehow, some way, he has mercy upon you. You going to have the courage to do that? You going to have the strength to do that? I stop and think sometimes when I fail to have the courage to mention Jesus to someone. And what was the risk? There's sometimes I'm like, I should have said this, I should have said that. And yet I look at this and think, well, would I go up in front of the king? That's a lot of courage from this young woman. That's a lot of effort from her. That's a lot of faith from her. All right, so Esther has heard this reply from Mordecai. And so she decides, okay, I'm going to need some help. So she sends the servants back to Mordecai. So we see the servants running back and forth. Now they're running back to Mordecai. And she tells them to assemble all the Jews that are in Susa or Shushan, that's the capital. And what are they going to do for 3 days? Fast. What does it mean to fast? Go without food, deprive yourself. Yeah, so why in the world does she want them to starve themselves? Absolutely. So fasting is a sign of religious obedience and begging for relief and mercy, very much like the sackcloth, very much like the ashes. It's not intended to be something that is comfortable. Why in the world would we do something like fasting when we're going to appeal to God?
I think it's to realize that He's our sustenance and not just, the physical food that we eat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He is the source of all of what we really need. But how hard is it to go for 3 days without food? That is really a sign of faith. I have a hard time going 3 hours without food. You go a whole day without food. You go 2 whole days. After a day, I'm hangry. I don't know about you all, but I'm very grumpy after a day without food. I've never gone 3 days without food. Can you imagine the amount of faith it's taking for the people to do this? It's a sign of faith. It's a chance to rely upon God's provisions. All right, so she's asking them, don't eat, don't drink for 3 days. Basically, they are doing this act of contrition and begging toward God. And then she makes a resolution. So she's going to risk her life, and she declares what? Yeah. If I perish, I perish. incredibly courageous young woman. So, we see her courage is going to turn the tide. All right. So that gets us to the end of the chapter. Now let's talk about just some observations here. All right, so we've been talking about how God provides. And so what we see is Mordecai reminding Esther and reminding us that her purpose, her reason here may have divine timing. There's so many things in our lives that the purpose is divine timing. God puts us in the right place at the right time, but it is still up to us to capitalize on it. When I chicken out and I don't mention Jesus when I had that great opportunity, that's on me. I've blown that timing. How many steps has God put in place for me to wind up right there with that person at that time to be able to preach some way about Jesus to them? And then I don't do it? How many times do we do that? How many times do we end up in a situation where just our actions or our behavior could strengthen the reputation of the church, and yet we blow it? God puts us right at the right time with the right person who would be encouraged by us, and we say something or we do something that is not in harmony with God's will. God uses us throughout our lives. And He doesn't tell us in advance when He's going to do it. That's why He tells us you need to always be doing His will. You need to always be doing the right things. Because God knows His divine purpose, but He doesn't tell us the details. He just tells us, be ready. Do the right thing. So, look at this contrast in her life. So, she was just this exile girl, an orphan. She was raised in the house of Mordecai from a people who had been conquered and enslaved. Then she ends up being elevated to the queen. And now she's put in this pivotal moment, this pivotal role. It seems almost unlikely, doesn't it? All these steps that have come through. It's almost like it has to be divine providence. God has allowed all these things to happen to her. Of all the people that were picked, it was her right here. And it's also the people around her. I think Mordecai was very important in this also, because we see Mordecai's faith and his influence on her faith in all of this. She relies on him for advice, and he tells her good, sound, godly advice, and she heeds it. So not only was Esther in the right place, Mordecai was in the right place. And Mordecai was part of putting her in the right place because he raised her right. All of a sudden, we're starting to see that God's plans are a little more complex than, well, I have a plan for you. No, I have a plan for you and you and you, and you're involved too. And by the way, all of us working together, God can keep all of that straight. Are we starting to understand why He doesn't tell us all the details? There's too many details. But He can juggle all of it. We talk about fasting. It shows this spiritual preparation and the faith to act upon risk. We don't really talk about fasting a whole lot these days, but it's not an unknown thing in the New Testament. You know, it talks about when you fast, not if you fast, or if you want to fast, when you fast. It's not really an observance that I think most of us do very often, but it's something that if you're interested in, there are quite a bit of scriptures about it. And so I encourage you, just kind of as an aside from this study, read about it a little bit. And there may be some spiritual benefits there that you may want to look into. All right, I think we're just a minute before the bell. So, I hit the wrong button. There it went. So, we need to recognize that God may call us at unexpected times. This idea of be ready, in season and out of season. All right, and there's the bell. I'll just put these up so you can fill out your sheets. Silence can cost us more than bold steps. So if she said nothing, she was still going to be executed. But if she said something, she may save everybody. Preparation through prayer and fasting strengthens courage. If you need courage, where better to go than the provider of all? Go to God. And discernment, recognizing you're for such a time as this moment. And so, really, what I'd like for us to do is to realize even these little daily things. Maybe your such a time moment is, I'm going to say something about God to this person. I'm going to exhibit Christian behavior to that person. That may, everything that you've done in your life may lead up to those little events. And who knows how they'll pay off. And that's where we'll pick up next week.